And joining us more for now, for more, is Mike Breen. He is the Vice President at the Truman National Security Project. For more perspective, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Elaine. It's great to be back.
Well, after this move, there will be about half as many Marines on Okinawa. What will this mean, if anything, for what happens on the ground?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a move that's been hoped for and planned by both the Japanese government and the United States government for quite some time. That's a lot of Marines on a small island, and many of my friends are Marines, but they definitely have a large impact when they're in a place. What we're also seeing more strategically is a realignment from a kind of Cold War era posture in the northern Pacific. We've had a lot of U.S. forces near Korea, north into Alaska, Japan, moving down into the southern Pacific, so rebalancing between the northern and southern Pacific.
Well, you're talking about realignment, but still the focus is in the Asia-Pacific region. Why is the focus for the Americans still there?
Well, I think in many ways it's interesting. We've talked about a shift or a pivot to Asia, but the United States has been a leader in Asia for the last 60 years plus, and I think will be for the next decade. One of the interesting facts that's really changed about the world is that transatlantic trade used to be dominant, and now trans-Pacific trade is dominant, right? There's more commerce going across the Pacific than the Atlantic. The economic future, the economic driver and dynamism of the world is really in Asia. And one of the most important things, although the least recognized things, that the U.S. military does in the world is really ensure global trade, ensure access to what we call the global commons, freedom of the seas, the ability to move goods and services around. And this is part of the United States' commitment to free trade and commerce in the Pacific.
I don't know if every Asian country feels the same way, though, with this realignment. I mean, some other countries have raised some concerns about it.
Well, I think we've seen a real welcoming in Southeast Asia for the United States to take a more robust role. We've seen that in the South China Sea and other places where there are regional disputes about territory, access to resources. We've seen over the last 3 to 4 years a real embrace between Southeast Asia and the United States.
Let's take it beyond Asia. There are still about 1,000 U.S. bases, military bases around the world. It's a lot. I mean, is it worth the expense?
There are definitely a robust U.S. military presence around the world. And I think that's part of the United States' role over the last 60 years, since the Cold War, since really the Second World War, as kind of the global guarantor of security. A lot of the economic prosperity that we've seen around the world has really been driven by a U.S.-provided security umbrella. So countries from Asia to Europe haven't had to invest in militaries to posture against each other. They've been able to invest in their economies. Whether that continues over the next 100 years, I think, is a robust debate that the United States is having in its political system, and I think we ought to have it.
One quick question. Do you see any more changes with the realignment? Do you see any more shifts, or maybe even less, or more of a pullback?
I wouldn't characterize this as a pullback, first of all, but I do think we can expect to see the United States adjust its posture in Asia a little bit to be a bit more flexible, and again, a bit more balanced between the northern and southern Pacific.
Okay, Mike Breen, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.